I'm honored to be here today with Assistant Secretary for Housing and FHA Commissioner Julia Gordon. Julia has a long-standing career of being focused on helping to serve underserved communities and giving back. And today we're going to talk about her career and what has inspired her along the way. Thank you for being here, Commissioner Gordon.
Thank you so much for having me. And as much as I enjoy being called Commissioner Gordon, as I was a Batman fan while young, please call me Julia.
Oh, that's so funny. I just put those two things together. Do you have a bat phone in your office?
I have a bat phone, I have a Commissioner Gordon action figure, and a few other items.
Oh, that's awesome. So speaking of that, tell us how you landed one of the biggest jobs in the administration.
To be honest, this is not a job that you apply for. And I think that the administration recognized me for many years of work of trying to bring different groups together to work on common goals. And that's both inside and outside of housing and mortgage, but particularly in the mortgage area. For the last couple of decades, I've really tried to be a person who brings together lenders, consumer advocates, civil rights groups, people in government, both in agencies and in Congress, and try to find the places where we can work together because that's so powerful. And I think over time, my interest in working in that way, as opposed to a more positional way, which is so Washington right now, I think folks just recognized that, and they thought that meant that in a position like this, I'd be able to get some things done.
Yes, I think that's a great way to look at it, finding common ground and how can we move forward to get things done. What do you think the biggest obstacles women face in this industry?
Well, we face external obstacles, of course, but we also face internal obstacles. You know, externally, women are often discounted, particularly the closer you get to either finance or technology. Mm-hmm. Women still have a long way to go for representation in those fields. Mm-hmm. And it can be hard to break in when you look different or sound different or come from a different background. But I think also a lot of women have to step up themselves to say, I can do this. Mm-hmm. And to not let, for people to not hold themselves back.
Yes. Well, and it struck me, you had to go through a confirmation process, which means you had to be really good at advocating for yourself. How important is it for women to advocate for themselves? And do you have any tips on how to help us do that better?
Well, it's incredibly important. I like to tell my mentees the story of the first time I negotiated my salary, which was not until I was 43 years old.
52.
Okay. And the only reason I did it was I had just read an article about how the reason so many women right out of school made less than men was they didn't negotiate their salary. And I was shocked how easy it was to do once I did it. And so, even just shifting our mind frame about something like that is important. But I will admit to you, when I was nominated for this position and had to go out and advocate for myself, and I know that people might think there's some army of people working for you for each of these nominations. There isn't. There are too many of us, too few people in the White House who are able to work on this. If you want it, you have to go get it. And that means calling people and asking for their support and asking for them to make calls for you. And it's hard. It is hard. But really where I found the impetus to do it is all the people I knew who believed in me. Mm-hmm. So many people had fought already for me to get the nomination that I felt like, well, if I don't do this advocacy now, I'm letting them down.
Oh, that's a really, really, really interesting way to look at it, because I bet people wouldn't think of that. You think of the fact that they supported you to be nominated, you didn't want to let them down, so you were going to make sure you got confirmed.
you know, everybody plays the mental game they need to play. And that worked for me. And I feel so grateful to the people who even put it in my head that someday I could have this kind of job. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, most of those people were men.
Oh, that's awesome. Some great male allies along the way. And I'm sure they championed you because of all the good work you've done over the many years that you've been supporting various aspects of housing. Let me ask you, what is the biggest career risk you've ever taken, and would you do it again?
So over the course of my career, I have taken many, many career risks, most of which consist of my quitting jobs I don't like without having another job to go to. And I know that that's really hard, and it's seen as some kind of career killer. But I've always felt like my life and time are so valuable that when I'm in a job and get to that point where I have a pit in my stomach when I go in the morning, I can't, it's not fair to myself to keep doing that. And so several times I've left without knowing what I was going to do next. And, you know, I had a pivot point in my career, fairly late in my career, where I started working on mortgage issues. I had come from, I'm an attorney, and I had practiced law in a law firm, and then I had worked in legal aid. So I knew housing. I mean, I had done landlord-tenant law and that kind of thing, but I really hadn't worked on mortgage. And I left a job that I didn't like, and I mentioned to a girlfriend, you know, I'm back on the job market. I think I'd really like to get into more policy advocacy type work. And my friend said, oh, well, there's this really wonderful organization, the Center for Responsible Lending, and they're looking for a consumer finance legislative and regulatory attorney. And I said, well, other than the fact that I've never professionally worked on consumer finance and that I've never done legislative or regulatory work, it sounds like a perfect fit. And I did not apply for the job. My friend sent them my resume, and they interviewed me, and they hired me because they knew that the skills I had developed in other kinds of advocacy would likely translate, and they knew that I had a good network and that I knew how to use a network. And it turned into a career that I loved and have loved ever since. You know, it took me a couple of decades to find my footing in a career. And, you know, I'm so grateful to that one friend.
Yes. Well, I think it's such an important message that a lot of times women don't realize their skills are transferable. We don't have to have that exact experience. We have this other experience that we bring that makes us so well qualified to succeed in that role.
No, and you know, I like to make the joke about, well, I had never done any of those things, but the fact is I had touched all of those things. Of course I had worked with legislatures before and had worked with regulatory agencies, just in a different way.
Right.
And it wasn't that hard to transfer these skills.
Right. So you're part of history. You have this amazing seat at the table with some powerful women who are helping to shape policy and housing for the future. So you and Secretary Marcia Fudge and Director Sandra Thompson, President Elena McCargo, you have a seat at that table. What does that mean to you?
Well, to have a seat at any table is something I'm incredibly grateful for. And if you ask me what my personal mission statement is in life, it's to make sure that any table I get a seat at, I am there to represent all the millions of people who don't have seats at those tables. So I actually think about that seat at the table metaphor or image a lot. In this case, having people not only whom I respect, but whom I also quite love and am very friendly with at that table with me is an amazing experience because when we get together, which is not frequently, we're all pretty busy running our own show, but when we get together, there's no posturing.
Oh, that's awesome.
We just go straight to the point of the things we want to accomplish and talking about how we want to accomplish them.
Well, as I said yesterday, women get things done. Thank you so much, Julia, for being here and sharing your insights with us today.
Well, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.